Therefore, in the early 1930s, but not in 1919, 1921, there came massive tax increases. The top rate of the income tax quickly went from 25% to 63%, then to 73%. The Revenue Act of 1932, by all accounts, was the most massive comprehensive tax increase in American history. You see the strange logic. The Fed and Treasury cause a deflation, the purpose of which is to justify a $20 price of gold. The deflation, in turn, causes a sharp recession, because people hoard appreciating currency instead of spending it. To counteract this, government caused thing, the recession, the government deficit spends, Keynesianism of Uncle Let, indeed sponsored by Hoover. But the financing of the deficit in this context is so challenging because of deflation that simply unheard of tax increases are required to keep the deficit within reasonable grounds. So, huge tax increases result. But all these do is kill the business activity that the deficit had sought to stimulate in the first place. Public works stimulus and tax increases canceled themselves by 1932, so the fate of the economy was in the hands of the currency master. Would it continue to insist still on the $20 price of gold and continue to force the overall price level back down to the 1913 mark in the service of this objective? Amazingly and unconscionably, the answer was yes. Even Britain, which had done the same thing and tried to appreciate its currency after 1929 to make good on the pound's 1913 redemption rate in gold, gave up in September 1931 and announced the pound was no longer on gold. Not the US. It continued to defy the speculation against the dollar by keeping the official gold conversion rate at $20 and beating down the overall price level, getting it ever closer to the 1913 mark of deflation. When FDR took office in 1933, he showed he understood the issues at stake about as well as Hoover had. FDR suspended the dollar's convertibility to gold in 1933 in imitation of the British, and a move that made some sense, but only a little bit. But then, incredibly, FDR announced that the government it would soon be illegal for Americans to hold gold. He set a deadline. All Americans would have to sell all their gold to the government at the old rate, $20, the going rate. If you had bought expecting a price spike, you weren't going to get it, because gold holding was quickly becoming illegal. So, Americans dutifully, lawfully, gave up all their gold, one of the most fascistic examples in all of American history, in exchange for $20 for every ounce. Then, incredibly, the next year, in 1934, FDR raised the gold conversion ratio to $35 an ounce. The very move, the thought of which had caused the 5-year flight out of currency to begin with, indeed, which had caused the Great Depression. The federal government's 75% increase in the dollar conversion rate to gold in 1934 is itself sufficient evidence to indicate that the Great Depression came about essentially to court because this move had not been made 5 years earlier. What if, after all, immediately in the wake of the 1929 stock market pause, the United States had raised the gold price from $20 to $35 an ounce? There would have been no massive move out of stocks and bank deposits because the alternative to currency, gold, would have already experienced its resounding price increase. That the United States remained imperious about the old gold price after 1929 for 5 long years and tried to make that old price credible for those 5 years, from 29 to 33, is why we got the Great Depression. And indeed, after 1934, the U.S. resorted back to the melon and strong price stability policy. The price level moved not a whit from 1934 to 1940. Hence you saw a return of growth to the economy in those years. The growth was not as good by any stretch as in the decade before, because the high tax structure set up by Hoover was there to damp down the economy as soon as it got going. There was also the residual effect of the Smoot-Hawley tariff, which in 1930 it tried to help out firms getting killed by the dollar appreciation by shutting out foreign competitors. So you see the fingerprints on this travesty, the Great Depression that gave way to the most hideous and destructive war in history. The causes of the Great Depression, if taken to a crime lab, come back as government, government, government. Fingerprints, DNA, everything. Everything except motive, of course. There was no maliciousness here, just incompetence and a lack of perspective. We now know, perhaps Ben Bernanke accepted, that permanent price stability is imperative for the economy to function well and to grow. If you're on a gold standard and you make a mistake and print too much money, by all means raise the price of gold and commit to price stability at the new high level for the future. This was the lesson half learned in 1921. The US stopped its crazy deflation halfway through erasing the 1913-1919 inflation of 100%. That was an excellent move, the stopping of the deflation, and it kept prices steady at the new par for the next 7 years, 7 stupendous years that are among the greatest in the economic history of the world. In addition, the government should have made one more correction and increased the price of gold by 50%, commensurate to the increase in the overall price level that was being conceded. And at every moment after 1929, the US had the opportunity to do this, to raise the price of gold, to staunch the flight from currency. And it took 5 years to see the light. Again, this is one of the worst episodes in decision-making in the modern history of government. The lessons for today are fairly clear. First, government, not business, causes any economic crisis, as time in the case of 2008-2009 will indicate. Second, price stability is imperative. Most regrettably today, the common view, including in the halls of power, is that capitalism caused the current crisis. This is dead wrong. Massive instability in the means of exchange, the dollar, occasioned by Alan Greenspan's last years at the Fed, caused this crisis, as is the considered opinion, and this is a little-known fact, of a majority of the world's top macroeconomists, led by John B. Taylor. Today, and Anna Schwartz. Today, we should recommit to keeping the dollar stable in terms of its domestic purchasing power as well as its rate of exchange to other major currencies. This in itself will allocate resources towards price stability, will allocate resources towards real economic enterprises to a great degree. In addition, we should do the opposite of the fiscal and trade measures taken in the 1930s. We should cut taxes, restrain spending, and encourage world trade. Does that sound too pat for you? Think about it. What if right now the US took dedicated action to keep the dollar stable, taxes low, spending moderate, and trade open? Right now. Needless to say, we would put our current crisis to pasture forthwith and start giving the Roaring Twenties some competition for the laurel of the most stupendous episode of non-inflationary growth and across-the-board prosperity that I has ever seen. Thank you.